Let's bring them on, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up, my people, and welcome to the SN95 Power Channel. Today it is freezing out here. It is snowy and icy, but the grind doesn't stop because I have to get this car down to Atlanta in 2 weeks. I've got to do some maintenance on it. So one thing that I noticed when I first bought this car is the steering is, it's not tight. The tie rod ends are fine, but the steering tracks a lot if you go over a bump. There's a big vibration with the 18-inch rims, the boat anchors on here. Not so much with the stock rims and tires, but definitely tracks a lot with the 18 inches. So, come to find out, the bushings, well, pretty much everything on this car is stock. The car has almost 80,000 miles on it now. We bought it, had 72,000 miles. And when I say it's bone stock, I mean everything is bone stock. Suspension wise, it still has the OEM parts on there. So I have to start knocking some of this stuff out. First thing that I can do, which is gonna make the biggest improvement on drivability, is we have these bushings for the power steering rack. Now, you can get these. I know a lot of people will do a solid bushing. I chose just a poly, just because it was in stock and it's easy to get. And sway bar end-length kit, those bushings. Now, just those two things alone will help firm up the steering. Like I say, though, I'm pretty sure those, especially the power steering rack bushings, those things are probably like real soft. It's even to a point like sometimes where I'm making a turn at low speed, the steering wheel would just like jerk on me. And I know that's the whole power steering rack kind of shifting. So we're gonna throw these on. I'm gonna show you how to do it. It's not very time consuming. Just basic hand tools. Same thing for the sway bar end link. Basic hand tools. It's not gonna take a lot of time, so let's get into it. So the process is gonna be pretty simple to get these, to get to these bushings. First thing you're gonna need to do is you have two bolts. You have a bolt here, you have a bolt here. On the back side of this K member, you're gonna use, I believe it's either a 15 or 18. You're gonna use a socket and use a open or box end wrench from this side. Crack it right here. Make sure it doesn't spin on the back side. This nut will come off. You'll pull this bolt out, repeat on this side. And I can't get it in frame up here, but you're gonna have to disconnect the steering shaft at the rag joint. Pull that out of the power steering rack, and then you'll have enough room to slide all this back without taking off the tie rod end. So remove these two bolts, disconnect the steering shaft from the rack joint, pry this back, and then you have a bushing on the front side of the steering rack and you have a bushing on the back side of the steering rack on both sides. So we'll try to get through those steps on camera, but my battery is acting up. We'll see. All right. Wimpy. It doesn't look bad. It just looks, I mean, it doesn't look bad at all. It's just too soft. As opposed to the polyurethane. So I'll grease these up and get them in. Real quick, here is the part number for the bushings if you're interested in changing, if you haven't already. All right, so now, you know, this one is always going to be the hardest one. So let's see if we can get this one on first. There you go. All right, I don't know when I knocked this over, but basically, you want to get the steering rag back into the rack. It's telescopic, so you should be able to push it up and pull it back down. Run your bolt back through, and now you can start buttoning everything back up. And, you know, just torque this down and put the rag bolt back in, tighten that down, and you're all set. By doing that, you should have no side to side movement out of the steering rack. This should be rock solid. If you have those mushy bushings before you do this, then it's easy for you to get some tracking. It's basically as a steering rack, it's just shifting when it hits a bump. So if you're having that, and if you know your tie rod ends are good, and you're still having some tracking issue as you drive, or you know you get some wheel vibration at higher speeds, you might want to look at upgrading to some poly urethane power steering rack bushing. So we're gonna button this up, and then we're gonna move on over to the end links. Now, you know, the end links really don't look that bad, but matter of fact, it looks like it's been changed, but we're gonna take them off, change them anyway. One last thing, make sure you get this column all the way down. If it's never been off before, you should definitely see an imprint, like I see right here. So I just made sure this was fully seated. Okay, so we've done the power steering rack bushing upgrade. This was the soft, weak bushing that was in there. That caused the steering rack to, you know, to shift and to have some unwanted play in it. I reached out to the previous owner, and even inspecting the end link bushings, or the sway bushings, those were new, those were replaced. So I'm not going to do that. All right, next simple thing to do is a wheel hub. Now, if you have any kind of roaring noise coming out of your front end, I would look at replacing the wheel hubs. That's kind of a easy diagnosis right there, is if you got that roaring noise. Sometimes if you're making a turn to the right or to the left, it's a long, hard turn, that noise goes away. You know, that's a pretty good troubleshooting tool right there to let you know that you have a bad wheel hub bearing. Now, these are pretty simple to take off. You basically have to take off all the brake parts on the front of the car. So caliper, mounting brackets, and the rotor. Now, some things that people are split on is the use of the aftermarket spindle nut. Now, I've used these aftermarket spindle nuts with no problem. Take that with a grain of salt, because I don't put that many miles on my red turbo car. So I'm going to give this a try, and hopefully I won't have any issues. So first things first, you gotta take that wheel off. So let's get to doing that. You're gonna need a 36mm socket for this nut right here. Probably a Humongo breaker bar and a torque wrench.
Rice on the track. 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 Rice on the track.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is where having a cheater bar is going to make your life a lot easier unless you are the Hulk out here. So I got my 36mm socket and I got my cheater bar, and we're going to break this. Once you get this off, then you might get some resistance if you got some kind of corrosion on the backside of this bearing. If you do, just, lightly tap it, walk it, and get it out that way. So let's get to it. All right, the old one is off. It's not falling apart, but it was making some noise. Here's a new one. I don't know if you can hear that on camera, but that's kind of that roaring noise you hear. So I'm gonna clean this off. Put some kind of grease on here. I have some white lightning grease I'll put on there. And the next hard thing would just be trying to torque this thing down to spec. I've read 200 foot-pounds. I've got a 300 foot-pound inch torque wrench or ratchet. I'm going to hit it with that and then probably try to put a quarter turn on it with the torque wrench and see where it's at. Don't mind the noise in the background, that's just my garage heater. So I put 150 with the torque wrench, that's maxed it out, plus or minus 4%. I hit it with the 300 foot-pound torque wrench. It probably moved maybe a quarter inch with the torque wrench. I came back with a breaker bar, tried to put another quarter turn on it. I didn't put a lot of pressure trying to do it. It didn't budge, so I'm gonna leave it like that. It's in here. Like I said, I've done it this way with my red car. Granted, I never drove the red car halfway across the country, but I've accumulated probably just as many miles as driving halfway across the country on that red car. No issues with the wheel hub nut backing out or anything like that. So we'll reassemble everything, rinse, wash, repeat on the other side. All right, up next, and you have to excuse the background noise because it is currently 20 degrees outside, and this is a detached, non-insulated garage, so I have to have the torpedo going. Spark plugs. So what you're gonna need: ratchet, 3/8, quarter, a couple extensions, a 7mm socket, spark plug socket, something to set the gap on your spark plugs, and your spark plugs. Now, for a stock car, I really have no preference on brand, so that's why I'm just going with Motorcraft. When we put the nitrous on here and you have to run a colder plug, then I might switch to a different brand, but for right now, this is just what we're going to run. Now, this might be remedial for some of you out here, but some people might not know how to do this. So, what you want to do is verify your spark plug gaps before you put them inside your motor. Now, I have two I just took out, and they both are two different readings. So on the gauge, you have all these in thousandths of an inch. You start at the smaller end and you just run your plug over until it stops. Now this stops at about 53,000. And this one stops at about 56. The idea behind it, the bigger the gap, the more potential spark you can have, as long as your ignition system is capable of producing a spark to cover that gap. So I'm just going to set these right at 55. Then a lot of times if the gaps are too big, I'll just tap it, on a piece of metal. Just tap the end, the strap, tap it down until that closes. And double check. And that's all it is. And you do that for all 8. All right, I have all 8 set in gap. So next thing we'll do now is remove the old plugs. And if you got some anti-seize, you can go ahead and put that on the threads. It doesn't take a lot, just run a little bit across. So the one thing I do love about these overhead cam motors is how easy it is to change spark plugs. So basically all you have to do is just take the ignition coil off and then your spark plug is right there. No more fighting around, header flanges or primary tubes or anything like that. It's all up here. So do them one at a time. The other thing about this too that I like, as opposed to the old pushrod motors, you don't have to worry about mixing up your spark plug wires and getting the fire order all messed up and the thing backfiring when you try to start it. Normally I would still just do one at a time. And so basically you just be careful because, these connectors are like 20 plus years old. Things get brittle with the heat under the engine. You take your 7mm and you remove this bolt right here. So it looks like there's a problem, like this whole thing is spinning. So I might have a problem putting this back on because the threads are just spinning up in here. So that's never a good sign. So let's figure out how to do this. So I'm gonna put some pressure up on the coil. Yeah, as soon as I said it was super easy, I run into this. So let me just think about what's going on here. I don't want to damage the ignition coil. So let me see if I can just kind of wedge up in here. See if I can get some pressure on this bolt. All right, you know, sometimes stuff like this happen and you just gotta figure a way around it. So basically what I'm looking to do now is something to just wedge up in between here. You know, sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches. And I know I said I didn't want to damage the ignition coil, but I did. No biggie. I'm more concerned about this right here. So this is part of the ignition coil. So what I need to do is put pressure up on this. This is just spinning. So let's stuff something down here first. Yeah, that housing right there is still on here. And the insert is spinning also. There you go. Horrible. You know, sometimes these things try to kick you in the nuts and there's nothing you can do about it. See, on these overhead motors, pulling out the plugs are hardly a problem, barely an inconvenience. So these are the original motor sport, and you just repeat in reverse order. Now we tighten these things up. There's a torque spec, but I've never put a spark plug into torque spec. It's just basically one hand and give it enough. That's it. You don't have to go all Gorilla Monsoon on it or anything like that. So going back on, I'm just gonna use a washer. Like, I don't have another coil over here with me right now, so I'm just kind of working off of what I got. So let's go to number 5 or number 6. Get that back in there. You know, sometimes you can just kind of wiggle this side to side just to try to break that seal. Not rocket science. Looks good. And got a nice seat, the boot to plug, and then repeat. And what I'll do is I'll finish the side, start the car, listen to how it sounds, and if everything sounds good, I'll move over to the next side. If it's missing or something doesn't sound right, then I know just to go over just these 4 instead of doing all 8. Start the car and then it's missing or knocking, then you got 8 possibilities. All right, got everything on this side done. So what we'll do now, start the car, see how it sounds. Hope this thing's charged enough. All right, sounds good. Now, This is the little cheap Amazon cold air intake. Now I think about it, I should have brought more of these coils over in case there was an issue. So no, I'm not putting any anti-seize on here because within the next 2-3 months, these plugs are coming out because I'm gonna have to run a colder plug for the nitrous. Wow, that was horrible. So now you just double check all your electrical connections. I can't tell y'all how many times I've forgotten to plug back in the mass airflow sensor after doing a spark plug change. Mass airflow, hook back up. Check. Everything else is in. All right, let's fire it back up. All right, that's a wrap. Up next is hitting the road and going down to Atlanta for our SN95 power meet. So now the only other question is, can I get out of here with these snow tires? I mean, with these summer tires on. It's like a sheet of ice. If not, then we'll be doing my snow tire hack. But I appreciate y'all sticking with me on this video. Had all kind of technical difficulties with GoPro failings. I gotta come up with a better way with my camera system. We'll figure that out. But I appreciate your time, and if you haven't already, tell a couple of people about the channel. If you can make it to the meet, please do. My man 99 Turbo _ Ghost is hosting. And we look forward to seeing y'all if possible. So I appreciate your time and God bless.